with Russell, Texas Bentley. Everybody remembers Russell. I'm here with Russell, Texas Bentley. Everybody remembers Russell. He's our favorite guest, and he lives in Donbass under the shelling of Ukrainian army for the 9 years and counting. Correct, Russell?
That is correct. Since 2014, I came, and they've been shelling the city ever since, and it's especially heavy right now.
And Russell dispelled the myth that the war in Ukraine started only in 2022, because when Russell got there in 2014, he already observed the full-scale, basically, war. Correct, Russell?
Yes, I was a soldier in 2014, 2015, and 2017 on the front line in combat as a soldier with Vostok Battalion, Hans Spetsnaz, and the DPR military police, the MVD.
And what is DPR that people don't know what it is?
It's the Donetsk People's Republic that broke away from Ukraine in the spring of 2014 after the Maidan coup d'etat, where the United States took over the government, put puppets in power, and took control of the military and the government, the economy, the society, the media, took control of the whole country. And the people in Donbass area, which is what was southeastern Ukraine, refused to live. I mean, they brought the Americans brought in genuine hardcore Nazis, the grandchildren of Ukrainian Nazi collaborators from the Second World War that murdered hundreds of thousands of people in Ukraine, in Poland, in Russia. And the people of Donbass refused to live under their control, and so they had a referendum. They decided to be independent, and as soon as that happened, the United States ordered the Ukrainian military to attack the civilians of Donetsk and Donbass with, the full military might of the Ukrainian military, which included airstrikes from military jets. It included artillery. It included tanks. It included snipers. It included, death squads with machine guns just marching down the street and killing everybody that they saw. Actual terrorism, genuine Nazis. And we have fought them to a standstill. The people of Donbass organized a People's Defense Militia, and they stood up against, what was then like the 8th largest army in Europe, or maybe even bigger than that. But we stood up against them. We got, some assistance in the beginning from Russia, particularly weapons. I mean, at least ammunition. There was a lot of weapons depots in Ukraine already that we were able to take control of and arm ourselves with. But the Russians did help us with certain types of ammunition. And with using those weapons and that ammunition, we were able to stop the Ukrainian army from taking control of the main cities of Donbass, which is Donetsk, of course, the capital, and then Makiivka, which is right next door, Gorlovka, and also in the Lugansk People's Republic, the city of Lugansk. And the front line has been like basically on the edge of the cities, on the city limits of these main cities for all these years. And then the Ukrainians had planned under, of course, NATO, American direction and control. Last year, the beginning of 2022, they planned to make a major offensive, military offensive, into the heart of these main cities. And what they wanted to do was just bring their armor in, and and from the front line to the center of the cities is only a matter of a few miles. And I'm talking about around 5 miles, And if the Ukrainian army had been able to make it into the center of these cities, then it would have been, urban warfare like Stalingrad or Fallujah or something like that. And if the Russian army had waited until after that happened, then they would have lost their main military advantages, which is their air power, their missile power, and their artillery power. And so They literally saved, you know, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of innocent civilian lives, prevented genocide, prevented ethnic cleansing on a massive scale, multi-millions of people. And so we thank Vladimir Putin and we thank God very much that they made their move when they did.
Recently, Vladimir Putin actually said in one of his speeches that he wishes that Russia would have basically, I don't know, come into the Eastern Donbass back in 2014, something along these lines, because in 2014, again, following that Maidan coup, sponsored by EU and United States, when Victoria Nuland handpicked new Ukrainian coup government, that's when Russia, I don't know, annexed, some say took over, some say returned back to homeland, the land, the peninsula of Crimea. But the Donbass people, they had to fight it on their own. And so recently, President Putin, my understanding from what I heard in his speech, said that he almost apologized or quasi-apologized or regretted not to provide the same protection to Donbass as he did to Crimea. Is that correct, Russell?
If he didn't say it, then he should, and I'm sure he
was
feels that way
like
whether he
that
says it or not. And so I certainly agree with that. A lot of people here agree with that. What happened was he was seeking a peaceful resolution to the conflict in Donbass. And so the NATO and the European EU and the US, they came up with this thing called the Minsk Agreement, where they basically lined out, they said, you know, if you give the DPR and LPR autonomy, you know, make them like federated, but under their own control, things like that, demilitarize the area, then, you know, then it'll be cool. But it turned out later that after 8 years of this negotiating for this peace treaty, it turned out that, you know, it was a scam the whole time. I mean, Hollande, who was the prime minister of France back then, and Merkel, who was the prime minister of Germany back then, have both come out and literally specifically said, we know it was just a trick to gain time to strengthen the Ukrainian army. And the Ukrainian army is now much, much more dangerous and much more stronger and much more better armed and better trained than it was back in 2014. And so a lot of people agree that it was a mistake for Russia not to come in back then. And I'm probably one of them myself.
Yeah, I believe Mr. Putin said something along those lines. And then you're correct, Russell. The Minsk Agreement, those were the peace accords, when I believe that militias of this self-proclaimed autonomous republics of Donetsk and Lugansk, my understanding, they surrounded the Ukrainian army way back when. And in order for Ukrainian army to survive, that's when that Minsk agreements were put in place. So basically,
exactly
saved
right.
Ukrainian army. And on top of it, it's supposed to have been a ceasefire. And also these Donetsk and Lugansk, the eastern Ukrainian areas, they were supposed to, under those agreements, be independent and autonomous, but within Ukraine, correct?
That is correct.
Bless you. And now in 2022, when Russia came in, on the request of Donetsk and Lugansk, because Ukraine was preparing that major offensive, and these two republics of eastern Ukraine asked Russia to recognize their independence, which Russia refused to do all these years. Remember?
Yes, they finally did, like a week.
Yes.
A week before the special operation began, where Russia came in, and you know, I mean, unfortunately, and everybody here has a lot of love and respect for Vladimir Putin. We appreciate very much the Russian soldiers that have come here and helped us to defend our homes. But of course, they're also defending their own homes, because as I've said all these years, you know, who defends Donbass is also defending Russia. And another thing that I've said for all these years that is absolutely true, and people all around the world should listen to and understand, is that as goes Donbass, so goes the world. If the Ukrainian Nazis and NATO are able to defeat the resistance to take control of the Donbass republics, Russia will not, the next thing they'll do is go into Russia. They've already been bombing Russia. I mean, not just, little border villages, but they've bombed strategic air bases far inside of Russia. And, if Donbass falls, it's my belief that Russia will fall. And if Russia falls, then China will fall. And if that happens, then there's no longer any realistic resistance to the Fourth Reich, the 21st century Nazism, the Great Reset, as Klaus Schwab likes to call it. And, it's, so as goes Donbass, so goes the world. So this is the cutting edge and the flashpoint of the Third World War, which has already begun.
And you guys now, the Donetsk and Lugansk Republics, are a part of Russian Federation under Russian law, correct? Because in 2022, the citizens of those areas voted to join Russia's Federation, and Russia recognized the will of the people, which the West didn't, and Ukraine does not recognize a referendum. But you guys are basically now a part of Russia. Has anything changed? Is Ukraine bombing you less because you're part of Russia, or not?
They're bombing us more these days. Actually, what's happens is, and this has been one of their techniques since back in 2015, at least, when our United Forces, LPR, DPR, Wagner, and the Russian Army, when we make military advances, when we have success on the battlefield, the Ukrainian and NATO Nazis take it out on the civilians. They bomb schools, hospitals, open air markets, just residential areas. And it's been really bad. I mean, I can say that in the first 8 years of this war, I lost 5 friends that I served in the military with. And in the last year, I've lost 6, brothers in arms, so, I mean, the intensity of the combat, of the bombing of civilian areas has ratcheted way, way up. And, it's, and there's been a lot of people here say that the general staff of the Russian army has done a very, very poor job. And, if you look at it from the perspective of, every basic military principle, from Sun Tzu 2,500 years ago to von Clausewitz to Erwin Rommel to Patton to Napoleon. If you look at it, I mean, military science is called science for a reason. And, it's and what the general staff has done. The Russian soldiers here are doing a great job. Both the volunteers and the people that have been mobilized, the conscripts. They're very brave. They fight well. They fight hard. But when the general staff, refuses to provide basic necessities, I mean, you understand things like a Mavic drone that costs $3,000. That coupled with artillery is a new kind of weapon that has not been used in war before, and it is extremely deadly and extremely effective. And
what
the UCROPs have,
like, what does that Maverick drone do?
It flies up, it flies over the front line, and it can spot positions, it can spot vehicles, can spot soldiers in trenches. And then the guy that's flying it, who's a kilometer or 2 away, looks on the screen and he says, oh, there's soldiers here at this particular position. He calls the guys with the artillery, wham. If they don't hit it on the first shot, he's still watching with the drone, and he says, okay, you need to move 50 meters to the left, and then they put it right on top of their heads. And that's 70% of the people, of the soldiers, at least on our side, and I'm sure it's the same on the Ukrainian side, 70% of the people being killed are being killed by artillery that's being aimed by drones. I mean, the drones now, they've modified them where they can drop grenades. You know, I mean, and there's tons of videos on the internet of, you know, the drone flies over and it sees some guys in a trench and it can drop a grenade like within 3 feet of them, you know.
And so there is a lack of these drones, or they're not being provided.
There's a lack of the drones. There's a lack of a thing called a thermal imager, which is like a night vision device that detects heat. I used one in the Army back in 2015. It saved my life one night when I detected a sniper that was sneaking up on our position and was already very close, and who would have killed at least 4 of us for sure, because we wouldn't have even known he was there if I hadn't seen him with that teplовизор, the thermal imager. And I mean, and you understand that with this thermal imager, it it detects heat, so it can detect a cat in the bushes at 300 meters. You know, so if you've got one, you know, you can see better than you could see even in the daylight, because even if the guy is kind of hiding behind a bush or something, you can still see some of that heat coming out. But if you don't have one, you know, you might as well have your eyes closed. And if the other guy has one and you don't, you stand a very good chance of having your eyes closed permanently. And so these kind of, you know, unfair advantages that the UCROPs, I mean, and of course, all's fair in love and war, but the equipment advantages that the UCROP Nazis have that are being paid for with American tax dollars and European tax dollars that they really don't even have. But that kind of a advantage is very deadly. You know, a lack of ammunition. I mean, recently Prigozhin, he published, you know, he had been complaining that the general staff of the Russian army were not sending the ammunition that they needed. And, you know, he was complaining to, you know, different politicians, generals, whatever, and they just weren't responding. So he publicly posted a list and he said, this is what I requested. This is how much ammunition Wagner uses over a 10-day period. Excuse me, I got a little bit of a cold. But, you know, and so this is how much we're supposed to get every 10 days. You know, and then it shows how much they're supposed to get, and then it shows how much they got. And in some cases, they got half of what they were supposed to get. In some cases, they got a quarter of what they were supposed to get. Some types of ammo, they got a 10th of what they were supposed to get. And in some types of ammo, they didn't get any. You know, and then Prigozhin, he's like, okay, if you're not going to send us ammo, we can't advance unless we have bullets for our weapons. So if you're not going to send us ammo, send us some of these little sapper shovels, you know, the little short Lopatkas. And they didn't even send those, you know. And so my friend today that I talked to today, who's back from the front, who's been a soldier for 8 years, you know, he said that, and he works with Wagner, he works with Vostok, he works with Somali, he works with, you know, other main units. And he says, and he's seen Prigozhin personally himself, you know. And he said, you know, the guys love Prigozhin. They love him. They admire him. He says, but they hate the generals in Moscow. He said they hate him. And I don't blame him. And a lot of people here do, because there's no excuse. There's no legitimate explanation for the way that they're conducting this war. There's none. And I mean, of course, there's things that they know or that Putin or Lavrov know that we don't know. But I mean, their failure to provide equipment cost people lives. And in fact, when Prigozhin made this list public, he also made a very brutal picture public, and it showed like maybe 20 or 30 dead men's bodies laying there outside the barracks. And he said, because we didn't have this ammunition, 5 times as many of our guys died today as would have died if we'd had ammunition. And having been on the front line myself, been a soldier in this war, I can certainly understand and imagine the terror, the hatred that's generated when you get thrown to the front, you get sent, to either hold a position or even move forward, and you don't have the things you need. So there's a lot of questions about the conduct of the war. The Russian soldiers are great. Everybody here loves Vladimir Putin, but we wonder why he is permitting incompetent generals, who I will not name specifically, but I'm talking about the very, very top of the Russian military, to remain in positions of authority when, they've, in my opinion, they should have been stripped of their rank and sent to the front with a shovel themselves, 6-8 months ago.
Russell, I watch a lot of videos from Ukrainian side, the soldiers posting their videos. There is less Russian because I don't know, maybe Russians are not allowed to have cell phones, but Ukrainians post constantly. They make TikTok videos. They're criticizing their generals and their commanders, not providing them that same things, basically drones and weapons, and sending them to positions without weapons. I'm wondering, it looks like there is somewhat a disconnect on both sides. Ukrainian soldiers are not getting weapons to the extent that they are expecting, with all the NATO weapons flowing there. One movie, I think CBS made it, called Army in Ukraine, and then they quickly shut that movie down. That said it's only 30% of the NATO sent weapons makes it to the front lines, which makes a lot of sense after watching a lot of Ukrainian soldiers' videos, when they complain that commanders just send them as what they call cannon fodder. Don't give them the same drones. But it sounds like on the Russian side, there are some of these problems as well. So
that's a fact, and it's it seems to be, it's kind of the same situation. It appears to me to be the same situation where in Ukraine, they say, it's almost like on both sides there's a depopulation program going, because what they do in Ukraine, for sure, and I don't think that they do it like this on the Russian side, but in Ukraine, what they do is they take all the guys that were, conscripted off the streets. In Kiev or in Odessa or something like that these days, if you're a military age man between 18 and 60, and you go walking down the street and the cops see you, these recruiters, they just pick you up and they put you in the van and they take you to the military station, and a week later you're on the front. And and a serious estimation is that these untrained troops have a life expectancy on the front of about 1 day. And what happens, the Ukrainians do is they send all the untrained new guys to the front line, and on the second line, 200, 300, 400 meters back, they have the Nazis, the hardcore Azov and Aider and Pravi sector, and they're not there to fight. They're there to shoot anybody that tries to retreat from the front line or to go forward and surrender. And I saw a very savage video just in the last couple of days where exactly that happened. It was filmed by a Ukrainian, and it was in the daytime, and like 5 Ukrainian soldiers with a white flag and their hands up are walking across the open field, and they all got killed. They got machine gunned down. They didn't have a chance by their own dudes in the back, And so that's for sure going on the Ukrainian side. And, and the thing is, you see, there's certain units here that I know of that I have actually given human aid to, local units, that are made up of, let's say, non-elite troops. They're doing the same thing with some prisoners and stuff like that. They're letting them go if they'll volunteer to fight. And I mean, these guys, they don't have uniforms. They don't have complete warm uniforms in the winter. They don't have, a Chinese walkie-talkie, just a regular walkie-talkie. It costs like $50 these days. I can tell you too that even a friend of mine in an elite unit, an assault troop, very high level, been a soldier for 8 years, and his commander, his company was issued a Tiplovisor, and it was one that had the crosshairs, and it was one that could be mounted on a rifle. And
so it's a heat, what is it?
a thermal imager.
Thermal imaging, thermal.
Yeah, it detects heat. And so the commander got this Tiplovisor and he gave it to my friend. And my friend said, this is great. I can see at night with this thing. I can detect enemies sneaking up. But I need the little adapter so I can put it on my rifle. So when I see them, I can shoot them. And the commander said, oh, we don't have one of those. And when my friend was back and he told me that, I went down. There's it's very big business. There's a lot of Russian soldiers here now that got a lot of money. And there's a lot of stores that sell military equipment, uniforms, stuff like that. And I went down and bought, the adapter for 2,500 rubles, what's that, like $30, $35 for my friend. And that made that Tiplovisor 10 times more effective. And a Tiplovisor, it's like, $3,000 or $4,000 for a good one. And this was a good one, but it's just like a viewing thing, and if you can't attach it to a weapon. So this kind of, and on the one hand, the nicest thing you can call it is stupidity. Because and then you have to say, how can anyone be that stupid? Because the commander's got to understand the difference between, just like when I caught that sniper that time, when I was back in 2015, and I had a Tiplovisor that was not mounted to my weapon. And so I'm just looking around and I see this sniper. And so I'm literally looking with my right hand and shooting with my left hand, but I can't tell where the bullets are going or anything like that. I was just shooting in the area, and it was, it's almost impossible to shoot like that if you don't have your thermal imager mounted on your weapon. And so, here's this commander. He's like, well, here, I got a Tiplovisor, and at least he didn't go and sell it like the Ukrops do, but he gave it to, one of his best soldiers. But then, he couldn't come up with 30 more bucks from the whole battalion, budget, whatever, to make it 10 times more effective. And this is the kind of thing that you have to say, is anybody really that stupid, or they just don't care? Or, and then you start getting into this World Economic Forum, theory about, that this is just another method for depopulating the world. And a lot of people have died in this war in the last year. A lot of people have died on both sides.
Yeah. And it seems like the Zelensky regime, or Biden, or Lindsey Graham, our Republican senator, and Democratic Senator Christopher Murphy, those two gave press conference a few months ago saying that, we like the path we're on. As soon as we provide weapons and economic aid to Ukraine, they will fight to the last person. Last person. That means children, women, elderly, everyone. So our senators, both Democratic and Republican, are making a statement that they are happy of the path that United States is on, that Ukraine will fight to the last person. So they don't mind how many people die in Ukraine. And
well,
Ukrainians better wake up.
All those people that you just mentioned are human trash. They are the lowest kind of scum that there is. As well, I have to be careful about the words I use describing these kind of vermin. But I can tell you this, none of them have ever been a soldier. None of them have ever been in a war. They're cowards. They're hypocrites. They're big talking punks, you know, and I despise those kind of people from whatever country they're from. The ones who say, "Oh yeah, we need to have a war," but I'm not going, and my kids aren't going.
Exactly. And let's genocide all the Ukrainians, throw them into that fuel machine, and then we will label it how we're saving Ukraine. And the whole world puts their blue and yellow flags things. I drove the other day on the streets of the town that I live in, and there is one house that consistently puts that American flag, and next to it there is this blue-yellow flag. And I'm thinking, I am from that area. I will never put that blue and yellow thing anywhere near my American flag for one thing, because I'm American. That's the only flag goes in my house is American flag. And secondly, I know what that blue and yellow thing stands for. The genocide of Ukrainians that Zelensky signed up for. All he had to do is follow Minsk agreements, right?
That's right. I mean,
follow Minsk agreements.
He won the election promising to end the war, and he's escalated it 1,000 times. But of course, the fact is that just like Poroshenko before him, Zelensky has exactly zero say. He's a puppet. He's a trained monkey, the same as Biden. You know, I mean, only an idiot would think that Biden makes any decisions whatsoever now. He can't even go to the bathroom by himself. You know, I mean, so he is not in charge. You know, somebody else is doing all his decisions for him. And the same with Zelensky.
Well, look at Nuland. She handpicked Ukrainian government. This is against UN charter. Going around the world, changing regimes, topple legally elected democratic presidents, and handpick via phone call with the American ambassador a new government to the foreign country. And none of these people are prosecuted. Nobody is raising any questions in the United States Congress of the conduct of this, deep state, shallow state. I would venture to say that they're shallow state based on what they do, and shallow-minded people. But yeah, it runs so deep, and Ukraine has been thrown into this fire pit, and Russian people are dying. And it sounds like neither Ukrainian military nor Russian military are really possibly doing everything to equip their people. In Ukrainian case, the weapons are there, they just don't make it to the front lines because it sounds like corruption and they're selling these weapons on the black market or whatnot. But in Russian case, it's I don't know, what is it? They just don't make enough, or
people don't understand that, first of all, the U.S. military budget, annual military budget, is $750 billion a year.
They raised it to $850 for the next time now. For the next one, yeah.
So that's like $2,500 million every day. Okay, so $850 billion for the U.S. military budget. They've given $100 billion, more than $100 billion, and this is just the U.S. Europe's also given multi-billions to Ukraine in the last year. So maybe 130, 150 billion in military aid has come into Ukraine in the last year. And the entire military budget for all of Russia is 70 billion. So Ukraine has gotten, at least been given, an amount of aid that's twice the Russian entire military budget. So that's a good indication. I mean, and it's, of course, to some degree an explanation, and it is absolutely true. I mean, there's already been, every kind of military equipment that's been provided to Ukraine has now been found for sale on the internet. I mean, I just saw the picture the other day. In Poland, they're selling hundreds of these Starlink receivers, you know, the like mobile internet things from Elon Musk or something. And I mean, and there's a picture, you know, and I mean, it's like, you know, an advertisement saying, hey, if you want one of these, you know, give us a call. We'll sell you one at a good price. And they had a photo and it was like, you know, a whole garage or something full of them, you know, to the ceiling, you know, and everything else. You see Stinger missiles, you see the machine guns, you see, you know, the anti-tank missiles for sale on the dark web. You know, they're going to, you know, Mexican drug cartels. They're going to, you know, Syria and Yemen, and they don't care which side they're on. They'll sell them to anybody. They're going to ISIS in Syria.
And now Nigeria, I believe too, I think their president expressed concern several months ago saying that Ukrainian, the weapons meant for Ukraine are ending up and showing up in my country, I believe he said.
That's exactly right. I mean, then that's just another of one of the many places that that's happening. And so, you know, I mean, people especially, and, you know, people in Europe are starting to finally wake up, I think. There's been some very major protests in the last month or so against their, you know, in Holland and in Italy and in Spain, in France too. You know, people are out in the streets in the tens or hundreds of thousands, very hardcore protesting, saying, you know, screw NATO, let's get out of it. They're not doing anything for us. You know, all it is risking, you know, a war. You know, I mean, the Third World War, you know, where were the first two world wars fought? You know, it's not going to bring anything good for Europe. I mean, if this one escalates outside of Ukraine, it's definitely going to Poland. It's definitely going to Romania. It's definitely going to Russia. It's definitely, you know, and at that point, the Russians have already said, you know, if we feel threatened, we're going to start taking out the decision-making centers. And they're not talking about Kiev. You know, they're talking about Warsaw. They're talking about London. They're talking about Washington, D.C. And they have the ability to do it. They have the actual ability, the weapons that can do it. But they just, you know, it's like anybody can have a gun, but I mean, it takes a trained person to be able to use it and to be willing to use it.
I'm glad you mentioned the military budget, Russell. I think China is also now upping their budget, military budget. And what surprised me, I almost think that the figure was about 200 billion. Don't quote me on that, but I thought, wow, that's pretty low compared to us, United States. But on top of it, like we've said, that United States has raised the military budget from about 750 to about 850 now for the next year. And Congress, my understanding, voted for it. But then on top of it, Pentagon cannot account for about $2.5 trillion of assets. So they keep raising military budget, they keep getting the money, and then when they have 5 audits and they fail them because they can't account for their own assets, 2.5 plus minus trillion dollars. Where's the money, Pentagon? Oh, you mean Biden armed Taliban and left them billions of weapons when he botched that exit out of Afghanistan? Well, he left all those weapons down there, right? And
That's
then it's
exactly
like,
right. In Afghanistan, it was
keeps
80
growing,
billion.
but they can't account where the weapons are going. So who is making this money? And also, I read an interesting article saying that United States is using Ukraine to dispose of its expired weapons
That's
because
also a fact.
it would cost, I don't know, I think I read it about 37 I want to say billion to dispose of the weapons reaching expiration. But this way they can send them to Ukraine and get rid of them instead of having to utilize them in the United States.
That's right. I mean, it's actually, I've seen photographs. Remember, they said they were going to send the, what's the name of the anti-tank rockets, the wire-guided missiles?
Javelins,
yes. And the Javelin has a 20-year shelf life. And the ones that were sent to Ukraine were 19 years old. You know, so in 1 year they become unstable, they become unreliable, they become dangerous to fire. And so yeah, they were literally, and also and Europe's doing the exact same thing. They're dumping their garbage in Ukraine.
And
charging
Ukraine,
full price for it too. I mean, this is not, you know, the United States and Europe are not saying we're going to give you all this stuff. They're saying we're going to give it to you, but you have to pay us back later, which of course is never, ever going to happen. I mean, but, you know, the guys in Ukraine, they don't care because they're, you know, Zelensky's going to move to his mansion in Miami, and, you know, everybody else is going to move to their place in Switzerland or, you know, Peru or, you know, Spain or something. And with you know, their millions or billions that they stole, you know, and so it's a dirty, dirty deal all the way around. You know, I mean, you got to understand that, you know, the people that escalate and prolong wars, the people that start wars, the people that force other people into defending themselves with weapons and violence. You know, these are the most evil people in the world. And when I call the United States the Fourth Reich, you know, the Nazis of the 21st century, I'm not kidding, and I'm not using rhetoric or exaggeration. They literally are. I mean, you know, you understand that it was the United States, you know, that backed the El Salvador death squads in the 1980s and the Nicaraguan Contras, who went in and slaughtered whole villages, tortured whole families to death in front of the rest of the village, and said, if you don't do what we tell you, we'll come back next time for you. You know, they were the ones who created Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. They're the ones who created ISIS in Syria. You know, they're the ones who created the, you know, the terrorists in Libya, you know, in Nigeria, in Somalia. I mean, you know, you know, they're the ones who armed and provoked Saddam Hussein into making a war against Iran, and which 1 million people on each side died. And they're the ones who armed and trained and paid and direct, you know, the Ukrainian Nazis now, you know what I mean? And to call them Nazis is not, you know, I mean, there was a very nice woman from Poland who used to interview me, Anya, very charming woman, very smart. And she interviewed me 5 or 6 times. And then the last time she interviewed me, she said, look, you know, it makes me nervous when you say Nazis, you know, I mean, can you not use the word Nazi? And I'm like, no. I mean, you know, if you see a dog, you know, you can't say, you know, you don't say this is an animal, you say that's a dog. You know, you have to, the first step on the road to wisdom is to call things by their right names.
Russell, I have to say, with the calling things as they are and understanding that the people are dying and Ukraine has been used as the proxy of the United States and EU that provides the territory and provides the cannon fodder basically to throw at Russia, while having no benefits, because Zelensky lost more territory to Russia since Russia came in 2022. All he had to do, follow Minsk agreements, work with the Eastern Ukraine, not genocide and not to oppress minorities, Russian-speaking minorities. But he did all of those things. So now he lost more territory. Now more Ukrainian people die. And Ukraine basically has no benefit. It's a ruined country now with the minefields that's going to take years to demine. Wouldn't you agree? Where
It's
the
a failed
land should
state.
be.
And you understand that now in Western Ukraine, the Kiev regime has passed a law that Polish citizens have equal rights in Western Ukraine with Ukrainian citizens. And, you know, when this thing is all finished, you know, if there's anything left of anybody anywhere on earth, then, the minimum that Russia can consider a victory is everything east of Kiev to the northern border of Moldova, to the Donbass republics edge does not cut it. It's if they only go that far, it's a failure. It's a complete humiliation and defeat. If they go only to the Dnieper River and they say, okay, we're going to stay on this side and your Ukrops stay on that side, they can't do that either, because if the Ukrops are on the other side of the river, they're going to use that river. I mean, it is one of the main transport, avenues of all, Ukrainian industry, Ukrainian agriculture. Probably 25 or 30% of everything that gets shipped out of Ukraine goes down that river before it hits the Black Sea. So, you can't have, ships full of grain or, metal or whatever going down this river if they're getting shot at, from one side. So the Dnieper doesn't cut it. Russia has to take control of Kiev. They have to control enough, at least all the parts where there's still ethnic Russian people, which is pretty much along that line, and if it's a little bit further into the ethnic Ukrainian people, well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and if they don't like it, they can leave. And if they try and do partisan like the Banderites did after the Second World War, then they get what they got coming, which is 10 grams of lead. And but anything less than that is a failure for Russia. It is a defeat for Russia. But when that happens, and Russia cannot afford to be defeated in this war. Sooner or later, they're going to have to start getting to work and taking it seriously, and they're going to have to win this war. And the sooner, the better. But what's left of Western Ukraine is going to become part of Romania, part of Hungary, or not Romania, but Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Poland. They're just going to come in and take it, And as far as I'm concerned, and a lot of people here in the Eastern Ukraine, they can have it. There's nothing good there. They've already stripped, they've already clear cut the entire Carpathian Mountains. I mean, they've already, they've been for years, since Saakashvili was the governor of Odessa Oblast. They're bringing in toxic and radioactive waste and just taking it out in the forest and burying it. And that's a multi-billion-dollar business, scam. I mean, there's, you can make a lot of money doing it correctly, but you can make super profits and 1,000 times more money, because you get paid the big bucks to dispose of it, and then you just take it out and, dump it in a hole somewhere.
Yeah, and speaking about not being able to say the right words and name things correctly, look at what media is doing. We cannot show any videos that would actually show the dead bodies, which are a lot, the civilian dead bodies everywhere in eastern Ukraine, from the Ukrainians shelling them for 9 years. Media doesn't show that. Then there is body parts all over battlefield, guys with frozen legs and the trenches filled with bodies, but we can show that. Oh, that would be graphic violence. Oh, that would be too sensitive for people not being able to handle it. I'm thinking, yeah, if we cannot show the truth, we cannot speak the truth about this war will keep going, because everybody could understand when people showed the Nazi Germany, when they had concentration camps and those little children were nothing but skin and bones, and they were experimented in, they were starved, the human bodies piled in trenches for mass execution by Nazi Germany. Everybody could relate to that. Oh, that's wrong. But we're not showing Ukraine and other countries basically having the same trenches filled with bodies, the same starved children, only to the lesser extent. Thankfully, at this point, we don't have a Hitler out there on the loose. We just have a Zelensky regime supported by Biden, but the horror of war didn't go anywhere. There is people dying and there is a tragedy, but people in the West are not seeing it. And they think, oh, that's war, it's going on somewhere over there. It doesn't bother me. I can go grill my hot dog. I can go on my boat and have a good day and have a good time. While if they would have shown the truth, the body parts, the things I see on Telegram, the white-faced corpses littered all over Ukrainian fields, to me, that's surreal. I used to live there. To me, it's surreal. This was a peaceful, beautiful country that would grow wheat and fruit and vegetables, and people have beautiful singing voices, and it was just always joyous. Now they're literally littered with corpses, fields, with body parts, with legs torn off, the heads. And I'm thinking, Americans don't understand what the war really looks like. Therefore, they don't mind the war. If they knew.
Well, a lot of Americans, and I'm talking about the majority of them, are really too stupid to have an opinion on anything. But they're so stupid that they think they know it all. And I mean, if they can't even find Ukraine on the map, they don't even know who the president of Ukraine is. They don't even know anything about the history of it, but they wear a t-shirt that says I stand with Ukraine, and they're like, hey, the Russians, I hate the Russians, and I love Ukraine. And they don't even know what they're talking about, And as far as what you're saying about the censorship and like that, and that is really pernicious. And that's not stupid. They're doing that on purpose. It is an extremely effective method of censorship. And when you say, oh, you can't show this picture because someone might get upset. Well, there are things that people should get upset about. What is everybody, is everybody in the United States now like a 3-year-old little kid that is going to go crying and hide under the covers if they see something bad or sad? And then the thing about hate speech, and I tell you, I hate people that talk about hate speech. And I'll tell you why. Because it's so stupid. It's not stupid, it's truly evil, because it's the absolute censorship. There are things that should be hated. There are things that must be hated. And what is the definition of hate? The best one that I've ever heard somebody come up with was fear and loathing. The combination of those two things is what makes hate. And there are things that are so dangerous that they should be feared, and there are things that are so evil and despicable that they should be loathed. And that's what hate is. And there are things that should be hated. And how can you even say that if you can't have hate speech? What, if you talk about like, mass murderers or cannibals or something, but you don't want to hurt their feelings.
It's just a packaging in order to censor free speech, in order to rob us of our First Amendment. Oh, it has to be these two words, like, oh, hate speech. It must be something so terrible that you have to censor people. Nobody knows exactly what it means, but it definitely infringes on everyone's First Amendment, because nobody can define what exactly is the hate speech. But it's a good tool to put a label, oh, hate speech censored, oh, banned, oh, this and that. And so just like everything else, just like, oh, this goes against the community standards. What standards? What about my constitutional rights? I'm an American citizen. I have my rights. Oh, that's community standards. Because they're overriding our constitutional rights with their censorship BS. Oh gosh, I said that. I usually don't speak like that, but you got me going now. Who is interviewing
and of
who?
course, when you talk about community standards, and then, and so you can't call a Nazi, but if some dude with a beard wants to wear a bikini and go to an elementary school and say that he's a woman,
that's okay.
Then you can't say he's not.
It's insanity, Russell. I'm glad that we agree that we here live in an insanity world, and you over there at least trying to keep some sanity, because I know that
there's some things that happen in the United States that will never, ever, ever happen here.
Well, going back to insanity, Mr. Putin was issued a warrant for his arrest by what is it,
The
International
International
Criminal Court.
Criminal Court.
Do you have any comment to that?
Well, Dmitry Medvedev made a tweet about it today, and he just put a picture of a roll of toilet paper. You know, and really, I mean, it's, you know, this is the kabuki political theater for idiots. You know, Russia, Ukraine, and the United States, none of them are signatories of the International Criminal Court. You know, the International Criminal Court is a clown show. I mean, it makes the United Nations look serious and sincere. I mean, it's completely, you know, bought and paid for. It's you know, it's a sad political joke. It's like when the United Nations Department to Control Nuclear Weapons, when the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant in Ukraine, under, you know, Russian control, was being bombed by artillery. You know, again, an insanely, you know, criminally insane, dangerous act. Was the OACE, I think, is the name of it.
Yeah, so OSCE.
Oh, so, and the guy came there, the head of this whole department. I mean, he's like one of the supposedly top diplomats in the world, the main guy to control, you know, prevent nuclear accidents, to prevent nuclear proliferation, stuff like that. And they, you know, and they came to the plant, and they spent a couple of days there, and then they went back. And the guy said, I mean, with a straight face, he said, yes, somebody is shelling that power plant, but we couldn't really tell who it was. And that's, I mean, and first of all, that's an absolute lie. Another thing of military science, you can look at a crater. Little kids here in Donetsk can look at a crater, and one kid will say, that's 120 millimeter artillery. And the other kid will say, no, that's 152, you know, or that's a grad, you know. And you can tell by the size of the hole what kind of shell it was. And you can tell by the shape of the hole where it came from. And you can tell by the caliber of the shell, you know, the maximum range. So you can look at a hole and you can say it came from that way, you know, within 15 kilometers or something like that, you know. And that's, I mean, and it's simple. I mean, it's like, you know, I mean, it's like the little kid that goes in the kitchen and he eats all the chocolate, and the mom comes in and said, did you eat all the chocolate? He's got chocolate all over his face. He's like, no, I didn't. No, the cat must have ate it. You know, I mean, so it's these things, they're bald-faced lies. And, you know, as long as people, you know, don't react even violently to people, you know, particularly people in power that say, you know, that lie to their face. And they lie, and you know they're lying, and they know that you know they're lying, and they still sit there and lie. And as long as people take that to be treated like that, like a little kid, you know, things will not get better. As long as they know they can just buffalo you, they're going to keep doing that. And really, the American people need to understand that, you know, they may think that they're safe now, but, you know, and really it's the same people that started this war, that are escalating it. You know, they're the same ones that are destroying the economy of the United States too, you know. And I mean, you know, if you think war is bad, you know, try some famine, try just there not being enough food for everybody.
Yeah.
Because then what do? Then you starve, which is the worst way there is to die, or else you become a cannibal.
Well, the banks are, you know, dropping like flies here in the United States. Biden is not concerned. He keeps bailing them out. And of course, some people say that they're trying to usher some digital currency our way with all these bank collapses to gain some more control over us. And of course, they want to keep fueling the war in Ukraine. What do you think as far as them trying to basically smear Russian President Putin with being this child abductor, with this warrant for arrest rather? Germany now, one of their, I don't know, top officials came out and said that, oh, if Mr. Putin comes to Germany, we will arrest him. I'm like, really? Do you think they've done it just in time before the Chinese leader Xi Jinping's visit to Moscow, just to sort of cool Mr. Xi Jinping down so he wouldn't want to
No,
go
I mean, because
see
Xi
Putin?
is
Or
not an idiot. He's not an idiot. He doesn't waste a fraction of a second wondering if these charges are true or not. I mean, and of course, the simple fact is that the children that were moved out of Donbass were orphans, or else they were moved out with their entire families, or at least with their mom, if their dads were staying to defend the country. But I mean, and they've been taken out of a war zone. They've been given, housing, jobs, food. They've been treated spectacularly, and for, I mean, you understand that there are people in the United States in positions of power. I mean, Bill Clinton partied with Jeffrey Epstein. Donald Trump partied with Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a child molester and a pimp. So do you think that Trump and Clinton and all these other dudes, Rudy Giuliani and, Bill Gates, do you think they just sat around and drank beer and smoked cigars? There's a reason that they were hanging out with him. So these are people that have really, truly abused children, and they're calling Putin, saying, who's saving children, and they're saying, oh, he's kidnapping them, and who knows what he's doing with them. I mean, I can tell you, and I'm sure you know, that Ukraine is the biggest center of production of illegal human organ trafficking in the world today. And of course, the organs that fetch the highest prices are from young, healthy kids. So I mean, it is the opposite of the truth. And when people can have a different perspective, I mean, one guy can say it's dark orange, and another guy can say, well, it's light red or pink or something like that. They have different perspectives, but if something is pink and somebody comes along and tries to tell you it's black, that's the opposite of the truth. And that is an example of evil, of someone trying to not only deceive you, but to get you to go along with the deception. And that's the tragic story of so many people in America now. I mean, it's like, I think I've used this analogy before, but if someone eats dirt for long enough, they get used to it. And if they eat it for too long, they start to like it. And then if someone comes along and says, oh, that's disgusting, you're eating dirt, it's getting all over your face, it's bad for you, you must be crazy, you're eating dirt, don't you even know it? And those people, by then, they don't even want to hear it. It doesn't matter. You can prove, you can say, look, here's a scientific analysis of it, it's dirt. Then you can, and they don't want to hear it. You can't, there's no reasoning with them, there's no way of proving it, the facts don't matter. They get angry, they get defensive, they're like, no, well, maybe it's dirt, but it's good. It's our dirt, and we're going to eat it all we want. You should eat it too. And if you don't eat it, then you're a Putin puppet, or something like that. So, and that's the case. I mean, the majority of the population of the United States has been infantilized, and they have been dumbed down to the degree that there are monkeys that are smarter than some of them, and they've been brainwashed. That's the tragic truth, man. And I can tell you, I love the United States, the good people that are there, which is probably 2 or 3% left anymore, that have a functioning brain and a function moral principles, and who have a spine, and who are not complete and utter self-centered cowards. That's maybe 2 or 3%, which is still 10 million good people or so, but the majority of them are going to get what they got coming, and they're going to deserve it when they do, and it ain't going to be pretty.
Oh, Prophet Russell there, Prophet Russell. First of all, in fairness to Trump, and again, not being apologizing for Trump or anything, but he did not call Putin criminal like all these other people. He actually spoke very highly of Putin, saying that he is very smart, and he said he cares about his country. And I even saw the meme. It was sort of interesting the other day. I've seen a couple of memes, photographs where people alter with little, writings of what it could be. On the one side, there was Putin, and on the other side, there was Biden. And the meme writing said, the difference, this man, pointing to Putin, cares about his country's border. Yeah, because Biden doesn't care about our southern border. We just recently almost have been invaded again by, I think there was, several thousand of these illegal aliens, immigrants. They tried to breach the bridge there by El Paso, and it was
I actually grew up on the Mexican border in South Texas, and I'm very familiar with the immigration crisis. And of course, I love Mexico and Mexicans. I speak Spanish. I spent many years there in my life. But, I understand that it's just the same as what happened in Europe. Immigration uncontrolled is a time bomb.
Exactly. And on top of it, if you think about it, Biden told everybody here, oh, you have to get tested for that disease we cannot mention, right? But through the border, you can come and you can bring whatever disease you want. I am legal immigrant to the United States. When I had to come, I had to provide tests upon tests and health checks and x-rays and everything and blood tests. In other words, when you come to the United States legally, the United States is protecting and verifying everything, and your history, your background checks, whatever. But Biden lets all these people pour through the border unattended. Now the human trafficking skyrockets. The children, unaccompanied minors, who knows, disappear within the United States, and that becomes a child trafficking. The drug cartels are sending their people. There were people who are terrorists trying to come through the border. It's insanity. And then we house them at taxpayers' expense at five-star hotels at $400 a day with concierge services and everything. What? So it's a double standard. He cares, Biden, about Ukraine's border. Oh, we need to protect Ukraine's border. But our own American border is being invaded, and it has been for years. Millions of people came in since Biden was. And,
of course.
And he doesn't care about us Americans, and he's supposed to be a protector of our Constitution, of our people. So that's double standards everywhere. And
that's right. And understand that, the first law of politics, and it applies to everybody all around the world, every politician around the world. What they say means nothing, and what they do says everything. What they say means nothing. What they do is that's how you tell what they're doing.
Yeah. Russell, what do you think? When is the big Zelensky offensive on Crimea is going to start? Or is it going to be on Crimea? Or is it going to be on Zaporozhye? Where do you guys expect it? Or do you expect it on Donetsk?
It's my friends on the front, including some very expert, serious commanders, are expecting it. You know, I mean, they say that it's inevitable. Hopefully, Russia will be able to respond adequately, but it is coming, and it might be a multi-front. If you ask me, my opinion, they're going to try and do what they're planning to do last year. They're going to try and bust through and come into the main cities, Donetsk, Makiivka, and Gorlovka. Lugansk is now a little bit further away from the front lines, but Donetsk, Makiivka, and Gorlovka are not. I mean, if Donetsk falls, Donbass will probably fall, and if Donbass falls, Russia will fall.
And Mr. Putin just recently visited, when is it, yesterday, Crimea, and then he visited Lugansk, right?
No, he was in Mariupol.
Oh, you're right, Mariupol. And Russell, he was there to view the construction projects and all. A lot of people in the United States do not know, because media doesn't show it, that Russia is actually rebuilding those cities, these war-ravaged, formerly Ukrainian cities in the eastern Ukraine, which now is a part of Russian Federation after the 22 referenda.
Mm-hmm.
So Russia is building houses there, and Putin came to inspect what's going on, right?
Yes, it's very nice. They're really nice new apartments. I was in Mariupol a lot last year when there was still fighting going on. And I mean, it was, most of the city was completely devastated. I mean, you know, the usual 9 or 15-story apartment blocks, you know, like from the Soviet days. I mean, they were so blown up that they just had to be torn down and rebuilt from the basement up, you know. And I'm talking about whole districts of the city. You know, the fighting there was intense. It was, you know, World War II style. And it's amazing the amount of reconstruction and the high quality that's already been done, you know. And so I think that, you know, it's a very good start. I hope that it will continue throughout. I mean, you know, like Mariupol, if you see a picture of not Mariupol, but Mariinka, which is just the next little town over from Petrovsky district in Donetsk. It's leveled to the ground. Bakhmut is leveled to the ground. You know, Ugledar, leveled to the ground. If you see like a video of drone flying over there, you know, it looks like, you know, Berlin in 1945.
So in essence, Russia was trying to avoid to inflict damage on these cities by coming in gently and softly and trying to negotiate with Ukraine. But in the end, Ukrainian army, from what I see, when they retreat or whatnot, they just continue bombing these things to the ground, and it becomes like a scorched earth.
Yeah.
So it's like no matter how and what you do, it appears that everything is wiped from the face of the earth there.
That's true. It is. Elena, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to go now.
All right.
Something I have to do. It's been great talking with you as always, and I look forward to doing it again with you. Thank you very much for your dedication to getting out the truth and the real news about such an important subject that everyone should pay attention to.
Thanks, Russell. I should have asked you how much time you have. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I wish I had more, but we'll talk again soon.
Have a great day.
Okay, пока.
Пока.